Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to World War III episode number 6. We've got a lot of crap going on right now. The whole North Korea ballistic test missile, gonna get into that. Gonna get into why they decided to do their first test on a ballistic missile since 2017 right now. What's with the timing? Gonna be talking about that. But guys, I want to get to something that I was thinking about last night with China and the idea that China could potentially, capture Taiwan in the coming months. Now, me personally, this is just something, kind of things I spitball in my head. Around 2 or 3 a.m. last night, I was thinking, if I was a Chinese military strategist, I would be telling the Chinese, listen, let's not overplay our hand. Don't take Taiwan. Don't alienate yourself against the West. China is in such a good position to where they've got America by the balls, with all the corporations having to do much of their manufacturing in China. If you're a Chinese person, let's not give America a reason to hate us. We see what's going on with Russia, and it's really interesting because, you can say what you want about Vladimir Putin. This has definitely been a failed invasion of Ukraine. We can speculate on what Putin thought was going to happen. I'm guessing he thought it was going to be a day or two and they would be welcomed into Kiev, and that has simply not happened. And the problem is it's snowballed to where this is the first major potential takeover in the 21st century. And what does that mean? That means it's going to be all over social media. And the West has major power on social media. We're seeing everyone spin it. We're seeing Russia become the number one enemy. If you're China right now, you're in such a stable, good position to where a lot of Americans are brainwashed and actually think Russia is the number one enemy, the number one power that the United States must overcome, when it's really China. Why would you alienate the entire West by doing something that Russia did? I will say it is presenting a unique opportunity to where if we were completely peacetime, obviously, and China invaded Taiwan, that would be the number one thing all over every news outlet. If they did it right now, it would still be a huge story, but you would also have the situation in Ukraine, so you would be able to kind of deflect some of the news. If I'm a Chinese military strategist, I'm telling my people in China, listen, don't do anything right now. Don't overplay your hand. Continue to grow the military exponentially. We're not on America's level yet. They're self-aware enough to know that. The Chinese are very smart. They know that what's happening right now is completely beneficial towards them, and they understand that having a massive military agreement with Russia right now does them no good. It does them no good. Now, in the future, I believe China is going to work with Russia as kind of a rival military agreement to NATO, and they're going to say, we need this agreement because NATO is so powerful. NATO forced us into this agreement. They're going to blame NATO for them creating their own military agreement and basically say, listen, if NATO can have this massive agreement in Western Europe along with America, Canada, North America, we should be able to have an agreement to combat that in case something were to happen. Putin hates NATO. Russians hate NATO. Why wouldn't they? It's extremely powerful, and you've got all these Western European countries who are in bed with America, the United States, who's the most powerful country. They hate it. They hate it. Russia has very little say over what happens in Europe. They want power back, so Putin invades Ukraine. It was a complete miscalculation. He thought he would be welcomed by many of the people in Ukraine, and let's be honest, Ukraine is completely corrupt. So if you're Vladimir Putin, the information that you're getting, it should be solid intel, considering Ukraine is a neighboring nation to Russia. This isn't like America sending troops into Afghanistan. You should be getting pretty solid intel, and I'm guessing the intel they got was that they have absolutely no infrastructure in Ukraine. It's completely corrupt. You can march on in there and take over anything you want, and many people will flee. Many people will become refugees, and that simply hasn't happened. And, the Ukraine government is telling every, young male over the age of 18, you need to stay back, you need to fight. Many of them are volunteering, I guess. So it was a complete miscalculation from Putin, the kind of response from the Ukraine citizens, from the Ukraine government. The Ukraine president Zelensky, this dude was a comedian. So you would think it'd be very easy to go in there with very little infrastructure. Ukraine is completely corrupt, and it would be very easy to take it over. Another quick thing I saw a little bit, I wanted to touch on it before we get to this bigger point on what North Korea is doing and why they're launching missiles right now, why the timing is so interesting. Quick point I wanted to mention, there's kind of this weird rhetoric going around America that, Russia invading Ukraine is completely fine because Ukraine is so corrupt. Guys, I could give a shit how corrupt Ukraine is. What I care about is Russia potentially growing and expanding their potential empire, right? So, I don't care if how corrupt Ukraine is. The idea that we should just be okay with Russia, and it's not a lot of people. I know a lot of people are really against this, but I'm just saying, the idea that, Ukraine is corrupt anyways. I know they're corrupt. Who gives a shit? I don't want Russia expanding. The number one goal is to not have anyone on America's level. That's why I'm so worried about China. Russia's not there, but I'm just saying, this idea that, Ukraine's corrupt, it's a good thing Russia's going in there. Guys, no. I don't give a shit how corrupt Ukraine is and how, bad of a country it actually is. They actually, apparently do have a neo-Nazi problem. That was a, bullshit excuse by Putin to invade, but that's kind of the excuse they used, along with potentially Ukraine joining NATO, which I've said multiple times in previous videos, that was never going to happen. That's another straw man excuse to invade Ukraine. But just this idea that, Ukraine is corrupt. Yeah, it's corrupt. Who gives a shit? I would rather Ukraine be independent and be corrupt. I don't care if they're corrupt. I care about Russia building an empire and building something that could potentially rival the United States if they're able to, overtake Ukraine. It's a massive country, the entire country. It'd be extremely hard to occupy, but if they did, they would be right on the border with Poland, and they'd basically almost be into Central Europe at that point. That's how big Ukraine is. So just that kind of rhetoric is ridiculous. I don't care how corrupt Ukraine is. I just don't want Russia to grow. I don't want Russia to get more powerful to where they could rival America. And even on a bigger sense, Russia does not have the innovation to rival America. The problem is if they join forces with an India, if they join forces with a China, that's when it gets to be a problem because they're growing, China's growing exponentially to where they could rival America. India has a massive population, which would give them a boatload of soldiers to use at their disposal. That becomes an issue. Now, getting to this North Korea ballistic test missile, their first one since 2017. I just want to tell everyone this. I think people make way too big of a deal about North Korea and their power. It's crazy to see, and even back in 2017, 2018, when it was escalating, this idea where the media will actually spend more time talking about North Korea's military than China's military. It is hilarious. North Korea can't even launch if North Korea right now tried to launch a nuke at the United States, it would probably be a 50-50 chance of it hitting. They do not have the technology. Now, North Korea would basically be like a Lithuania in terms of what Lithuania does for NATO. I'm talking about a rival NATO. You would see China, Russia, and then a lot of smaller countries, including a country like North Korea. It's kind of like NATO, where it's mainly the United States, Great Britain, and then you've got countries like Lithuania that are in it as well. That's what North Korea would be to a rival NATO pact. They're just not a strong country, and they're a country that lacks innovation because they have complete control, complete power over their citizens. It's very hard for the citizens to innovate, create new technology, and help their military. They spend a bunch of money on military, don't get me wrong. Complete dictatorship, but they simply, the media focuses on North Korea way too much. If it were up to me, I would have 100% focus on what China is doing rather than anything. And they're launching a ballistic missile. You know what? China doesn't have to test ballistic missiles. You know why? Because their technology is good enough. They know where the ballistic missile is going. They don't got to do a test launch. Okay? So we got to be worried about North Korea, right? I mean, come on, guys. It is ridiculous, but the timing of this is interesting. It's very clear that North Korea sees the situation with Ukraine and Russia. Everyone's focused on that. little bit of an opening, right? Little bit of a reprieve. You can launch your ballistic missile. People will tweet about it. They'll talk about it. But if we were at peacetime and if Russia was not invading Ukraine, this would be the #1 story for 2 weeks over all of Western media. But it's not going to be. So they see a little opening to test some of their ballistic missiles, and they're taking advantage of that. And that's kind of the idea of China invading Taiwan. You see another major event happening to where, yes, China invading Taiwan and taking it over would be huge, but it's kind of like it's 50-50. Because we still got to focus on Ukraine and Russia and then China and Taiwan, as opposed to if there's nothing happening in Europe, you're just talking about 100% of the media on the situation between China and Taiwan. So North Korea using the timing of the conflict in Europe right now, in Eastern Europe, to launch their ballistic missiles and do little ballistic missile tests. I think people way overreact to North Korea's power. Sure, they spend a ton of money on the military, but they are a small country and they lack innovation. Technology innovation is very lacking due to the amount of control they have over their citizens. It's very hard for their citizens to innovate and create new things. But again, with North Korea, the one thing I would say, if we do get a rival NATO pact between China and Russia, you would have 100% have North Korea in that pact as well. So I'm just saying that's what would happen there. That's why I'm saying we need. I've proposed this in a previous video. We need kind of a Pacific States NATO. And I'm almost going as far as to say, if, Russia invades an Eastern European country that is in NATO, like Lithuania, when it comes to something like Article 5, I don't think we're going to be able to help those European nations. I'm sorry, but if I was America, I would say we need to make sure we save all of our assets. We will not be deploying troops if Article 5 of NATO is enacted, because we have faith in the European Union to overcome Russia. I mean, we're seeing Russia struggle with Ukraine. I'm just saying we need to not waste troops in Europe when we've got a major power like China forming, where all of our attention, or at least 90% of our attention, should be focused on China. If I'm telling those people, listen, you got to protect Europe. You got to protect Europe. We have issues with China right now where there's 2 superpowers in the world, the United States and China. So why would it make sense for us, the one superpower, to not pay attention to the one other superpower in the world that is rapidly growing faster than we currently are? Why would that make sense? I have full faith. No, I would not want Russia to overtake Europe or anything like that. That would not be a good scenario. I'm just saying, let's use our assets wisely when it comes to this NATO. It's like, if Russia invades Lithuania, are we really going to have to send troops? Like, really? I mean, why is Lithuania in NATO in the first place? Like, why are we letting all these very small... I understand it's like, oh, so Russia can't just march in. I get that. But still, at this point, Russia, their overall standing in the world is so fractured. Like, what they're doing, it's going to take decades to repair any sort of relationship with many of these countries, which is so weird considering Trump did seem like he had a stable relationship with Putin. And I think we really missed a window to potentially denuclearize everything. I proposed something a few weeks ago in one of these videos, maybe it was episode 2 or 3, where I was like, man, if we could get an anti-nuke pact where we got almost every single country in the world to agree to sign on to this pact, to where if any country uses a nuclear bomb, every country that signed onto that pact will 100% make sure they come together and destroy and blow the one country that uses the nuclear bomb off the face of the earth. And I don't know how good Trump's relationship with Putin was, but it's like, you would love, if you propose something like that, to be in good standing with Russia to where you could get everybody to sign it, because at the end of the day, nuclear bombs are just so anti-humanity. They're just so anti-humanity. Like, I cannot stress that enough. At the end of the day, we all want to live. What Russia's doing right now is sad, it's bad, but, they're invading. They're not nuking anything. If you use nuclear bombs, to me, Your country should be eviscerated. And I say that as somebody, as an American, where we have the biggest nuclear arsenal in the world. Of course, when you Google who has the most nuclear bombs, they'll say Russia, when many of Russia's nuclear bombs are extremely small range, and we actually don't even share our numbers. Neither does China. China has better nukes than Russia. It's the United States number one, China number two, everyone else, Russia number three, and so on. People worried about Russia nuclear bombs over China's nuclear bombs. It's laughable. It is laughable what's going on right now. So that's another situation to look at with the North Korea testing all of their, their few ballistic missiles. Again, my summary is I just think it is simply to take advantage of a current, world that is at war, at least in Europe. Many of the Western media focusing solely on Europe. If we were at peacetime and North Korea does this, it's breaking news for 2 or 3 weeks. Should we sanction North Korea? Somebody's going to talk about this for a day or two, and then it's going to be old news because there's going to be a new development in Kiev, or the Russians are advancing into Kiev or something like that. You guys know what I'm saying, where, it's a distraction. It's a good distraction, and that's why you've got China thinking about possibly taking Taiwan while this whole thing happens. If I'm a Chinese government official, I'm saying, guys, let's not do that. Let's not overplay our hand here. We have America right where we want them. We're rapidly growing, but we have to be self-aware enough to know we've not come to, we've not gotten on that level yet that America is at. We're getting close. We're getting close, and we're growing at a faster rate than America is, but we're not on that level. So why invade Taiwan and completely give up any leverage we had? Right now, you've got a lot of American people who, they listen to the media, they say, oh, Russia's horrible. Like, if you were to ask the average American, what country is the number one threat to America? You would probably get, this is just an estimate, you'd probably get about 75% of the population saying Russia, and it's laughable. It's laughable. The number one answer, it's not even close, it's China, and it's not even remotely close. And the problem for China would be, I would pitch to the Chinese if I was a Chinese official, if we invade Taiwan, that answer probably shifts to 75% of people saying, American people saying China. We don't want the American people to view view China as a rival. And if you invade Taiwan right now, I'm saying you can do it in the future, but right now, as you're still growing, as you're still building, it's just like Russia asking China for military support. Don't give them any support. It's not that you don't want to do a potential military agreement with Russia down the line, but read the room, understand all of the West, all of the citizens in the West, especially America, are 1,000% against Russia. If Biden did something, some sort of military action against Russia, many American citizens would be in support of it, which should scare the crap out of Russia due to how powerful America's military is. Like, if Biden has free reign to do some sort of military action against Russia, to where the American citizens hate Russia so much now because of their invasion into Ukraine, they would support it. What a horrible idea by Putin to invade Ukraine with no logical reason. If I was a Russian military strategist, before this whole thing started, I would say we need a legitimate reason. Now, you could stage a terrorist attack in Russia, blame it on Ukraine, and then invade. That's the simplest way. But it's like, you can't just invade Ukraine and say it's to denazify it. The only hypothesis I can think of is their intelligence was so bad to where they thought it was going to be an Adolf Hitler invading Austria scenario, where you basically get welcomed in. And at that point, it's almost like shocking how bad their intelligence would have to be to think that, considering Ukraine is right next to Russia. You'd think you'd have pretty good intelligence in Ukraine. So who knows, guys? It's just such a catastrophic disaster for the Russians, no matter what happens. And now Putin is backed into a corner, which is a terrible thing, because when you're backed into a corner, when you're desperate, do you pull out the chemical warfare? Do you pull out the nukes, the small-scale nukes? We'll see what happens, guys. Russia is stalled basically everywhere, at least last time I saw. They're progressing very slowly. They're losing weight. Nobody knows how many troops they've lost, but they thought this was going to be an Adolf Hitler invading Czechoslovakia type thing where it's a joke. You can annex it. The other thing, everyone keeps saying Russia annexed Crimea, and did Crimea want to join the Russian Federation? Guys, what an annex is, it's the one country, it's Russia invading, let's just say Crimea, but Crimea agreeing to join Russia. That's the only way an annexing would work. If Russia just overtook Crimea, that's an invasion. It's not them getting annexed. So everyone says, I guess since it's on record like they annexed Crimea, to annex a country, the other country has to agree to join your country. You can't take it by force. Like Russia taking over Ukraine and installing a puppet government, that's not an annex. That's just an invasion and a takeover. So I don't know, maybe Crimea agreed to it. I'm guessing they did. Everyone's calling it an annex. So, in 2014, I was a lot younger. I didn't really know, but I just found that weird. All right, guys, and just to end off this video, I wanted to share something that is hilarious. It's an old tweet from CNN about climate change. So it says, scared by the new report on climate change? Here's what you can do to help. Eat less meat, about 30%. Swap your car or plane ride for a bus or train. Use a smart thermostat in your home. So all these multi-billionaires using their private planes, if we, the citizens, eat less meat by 30%, we can change the climate. It's just such a funny tweet. It's so tone deaf. Like, maybe tell the billionaires, and you know what, they probably are, because the left hates billionaires. It's like, maybe tell the billionaires to stop using the private planes and CO2 emissions, but guys, climate change is hilarious. I just thought that was a funny tweet to end on. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.